Reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to thee, O Lord.
Jesus came to a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. She had a sister called Mary, who sat down at the Lord's feet and listened to him speaking. Now Martha, who was distracted with all the serving, said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister is leaving me to do all the serving by myself? Please tell her to help me." But the Lord answered, "Martha, Martha," he said, "you worry and fret about so many things, yet few are needed. Indeed, only one. It is Mary who has chosen the better part. It is not to be taken from her." Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to the Lord Jesus Christ.
The Gospel wipe away all our sins. Some hardly a bit. There we go. So I'm distracted with all the serving. The Holy Gospel, and in fact the readings today remind us of hospitality. And in the case of the book of Genesis, it's the three men. It's a mystery really, the identity of the three men, but the inference is surely it's God visiting Abraham and Sarah, and that the three might well be a figure of the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Spirit, or perhaps Michael, Gabriel, Raphael. Again, we're not told exactly. Nonetheless, the promise accompanies the hospitality that Abraham shows in the fruitfulness of, even though well on in years, of the birth of Isaac that was to follow. And Isaac actually translates, as I understand, to the name means laughter, because Sarah laughed. She said, "Joke me, I'm well on in years, this is never going to happen." And she disbelieved. And yet it did come to pass. But on the strength of the hospitality. And there's a nice little expression, I don't know if there's something similar in Irish or not, but that you never know who you might be entertaining, that you could be entertaining angels. You know, you kind of do the act of charity for somebody, you give hospitality to somebody who's a bit inconvenient. You just never know, to a stranger, you just never know who it might be. And that's echoed for us nicely in the Gospels, because the Lord said, "Insofar as you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, what you did, do it to me." Seeing and serving Christ in others. And that's a theme that Frank Duff took very much to heart in the hostels. It still applies to this day. The hostels for the homeless here in Dublin, the Morning Star for homeless men, and Regina Celli for homeless women. And the story is told, and Frank didn't make that much of it in the day. But the hospital for men opened on the 27th of March in the 25th of March, Annunciation, Feast of Our Lady, in 1927. And it took over the South Dublin Union. It had been a workhouse hospital for the poor at the time. Things were not, conditions were very primitive. A lot of people living in tenements in Dublin, in the inner city, back in those days, and desperate poverty. So Frank opened this hostel, sheer act of faith on his part, because he looked for help from the St. Vincent de Paul. They just couldn't afford to underwrite the activity he was taking on. So he got a few friends together, and just in faith they began. But the story is told that they moved into the house, it's still there to this day, the top of Morning Star Avenue, which was the doctor's house, attending the workhouse hospital as it had been, the South Dublin Union. Or actually, beg your pardon, North Dublin Union, because it's north of the city. South Dublin Union is St. James's Hospital today. So at any rate, he only just moved in, and it wasn't that long the hospital had just opened, and late at night he got a knock on the door. And he looked out, and it was a young boy, he said about 13 or so, that sort of age, and disabled and in needing accommodation, looking for someone to stay. And Frank thought, well, it's late at night now, I can't just put him into the men's hospital. He might, probably not the best idea. He needs some bit of supervision, or he minding wouldn't be a good idea. So Frank took him into his own home, and the story is that he gave him his own bed, and Frank slept on the couch downstairs. And in the morning, Frank would get up early to go down to Church Street to go to 6 o'clock Mass in the morning. And when he came back, his mum and his sister were also staying in the same house with him. His sister was quite ill, and his father had died, so he was caring for them in the house. And they were well enough to do that they had a lady who came in, a maid that came in to do a few jobs for them in the morning, like for home help. And when Frank came back from Mass in the morning, she said, "Who was that beautiful young boy who came down the stairs and just walked out the door this morning? He was radiant. And there was something absolutely out of this world about, something extraordinary about him." Frank says, "Well, I don't know, I left the young lad in here last night, and when I came back I was going to sort him out and figure out what to do with him." And that was Frank heard nothing else afterwards. And what he thought to himself, he kind of considered for a reason, well, maybe it was the divine child during the time he got lost in the temple. The time means nothing to God, that maybe this was where he had kind of come to find a bit of refuge in the time he was lost. And again, there was no trace after it, there was no accounting for the boy. So he took it as a sign of confirmation of the work of the hostel, that whatever you do for the least of these, you do for me. That's the story. And we just have it from Frank himself. Again, he wasn't making a big song and dance out of it, he wasn't making anything, except that it was just an indication from the Lord. So the Gospel teaches us that Martha was the busy one. She liked to busy herself, obviously, about the duties, and somebody has to do the catering, somebody has to put the kettle on and make the scones. They're not going to make themselves. So her role is very necessary. But if we look carefully at the words there, she was distracted, first of all, and then you see she's referring 4 times to herself. She says, "Lord, do you not care that my sister, this not Mary, my sister, that one there, who's, she's the problem, is leaving me to do all the serving by myself." You see what's going on. And please tell her, not Mary, please tell her to help me. So me. And this is the problem. Not the serving, I would say, in and of itself. Because if she simply just changed the way of thinking a little bit, if she realized she was serving Christ, God, the second person of the divine Trinity, it would have changed everything, I'm sure. Yeah, and it did, of course, as we understand later. It was about herself. And so we can allow the duties and the tasks and the mundane and the boring, repetitive stuff we have to do every day to become a distraction, or we can allow it to become something fruitful and creative and supportive, let's say, of our lives of faith and of self-sacrifice. There's quite the difference there. The good news is that later on, and I think it's in John's Gospel, Martha appears again. Maybe it's in Luke. But listen out for it, because we'll hear Jesus raises Lazarus, their brother, from the dead. And it's Martha who goes first to run to meet Jesus. Mary stays in the house. And of course Martha's the busy, that's her personality. That's what she does. And she meets the Lord, and with this lovely testimony of faith then from her. "Lord, if only you were here, my brother wouldn't have died. And I am the resurrection and the life." Jesus says to her, "And do you believe this?" And she says, "Yes, Lord, I believe." So she has moved way on in her spiritual life, as we'll see later on when she appears again. So, a little reminder for us, you never know who you might be serving. Not let the actual tasks at hand be a distraction or an annoyance or a frustration, but see them as a simple task and a duty that we fulfill as we do each and every day, but with the Lord in mind, perhaps, or that can feature in our own daily round as well. So, few things are needed in the end, indeed only one. Mary has chosen the better.